Is that okay? Okay. Good evening, and welcome to the council meeting of April 29th, 2024. We are fortunate to be joined by our sign language interpreter this evening. Please welcome Sydney Pakosh. Oh my gosh, Sydney, I even practiced. Pakosh. My sincere apologies. The meeting is being live streamed on Town of Kentville YouTube channel. The most up-to-date meeting package is on the Town of Kentville website. This meeting is called to order. Have all of the councillors received and reviewed their meeting packages? Does any member of council have information pertaining to a matter before this council which has not been publicly circulated? I will remind members of council that we are in decision-making mode and we should be mindful of our decision-making wheel. We have committed to making balanced and respectful decisions and adhering to our code of conduct. This council, through policy and by motion, has adopted Robert's Rules as our rules of order, our parliamentary procedure. We will be voting by electronic means for all votes except for administrative. Are there any conflict of interest issues we should be aware of before the meeting commences? I note that we have quorum. We have been provided with proposed agenda. CAO, are there any additions to the agenda?
No, there are not, Your Worship.
Thank you. Council, are there any further additions to the agenda? All right, if I could have a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Zabian, thank you. Councillor York, thank you. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you very much. Our next item is the approval of the minutes. You have the minutes from the 25th of March 2024 council meeting distributed for your review. If there are no changes, the minutes are adopted as distributed. If there are changes, the recording secretary will annotate the minutes in red, and the annotated minutes will be added to the electronic meeting file as approved. Any changes to the council meeting minutes? None? Gotta love it. The next set of minutes were our March 25th special council meeting, and they were distributed for your review. If there are no changes, the minutes are approved as distributed. If there are changes, the recording secretary will annotate those. No changes? Wonderful. All right, we do have business arising from our past business, and the first matter is with regards to second reading of deed transfer tax. We have correspondence on this matter. We have received 2 items of correspondence, and they are part of the package. The first matter was from citizen Dave Ritzy, and he was speaking against the matter, and the other one was from the Annapolis Valley Chamber of Commerce, and again, they were speaking against the deed transfer tax. All right, moving right along. We now are moving on to second reading. We have a recommendation that staff has prepared a detailed report to council outlining the implementation of deed transfer tax. And additionally, during the CIP, the capital investment plan discussion, the deed transfer tax was highlighted as a means of funding capital investment through revenue rather than debt financing. CAO, did you wish to proceed with a presentation prior to moving a motion on the floor?
Yes, Your Worship, I would. Council would have also received on January 29th a report on deed transfer tax authored by interim CAO Louis Coutinho, and a report on March 25th as part of first reading. This is a brief PowerPoint presentation. It's not meant to capture all of the points that were presented in the report, and we'll be happy to answer questions following the presentation. Second reading deed transfer tax. And the legislative authority to enable the town to consider a deed transfer tax is found in the Municipal Government Act, sections 102, 103, and 104. So this isn't the first time that the town has looked at a deed transfer tax. It has been looked at least twice previously, and during those discussions, council did not implement the tax. As we recently went through the 5-year capital investment plan, we all recognize that Kentville is facing a number of capital cost drivers that will require significant investment in the years ahead. If you look at the value of the current plan, it's over $26 million. If you go back 2 or 3 years, then a capital investment plan for a year would average around $2 to $2.3 million a year. The transfer tax can provide a substantial tool in supplementing property tax in funding these acquisitions. And of the 49 municipalities, 47 municipalities currently have a D-transfer tax. The only 2 that don't are Kings County and the town of Kentville. So what is a D-transfer tax? D-transfer tax is payable on transactions where the following criteria are met. It requires a deed. It must convey an interest in real property, and there must be a value associated with that transaction. So why are we looking at a D-transfer tax now? As stated earlier, we are facing significant funding challenges associated with the 5-year capital investment plan. The plan has an unfunded portion currently of $963,937. As well, there's more than $6 million where we've made assumptions on receiving provincial or federal grants, either at 73% or 50% for some of the larger ticketed items. If we didn't get funding for those projects, then we would either not be able to do them or we'd have to look at financing them ourselves. Over the course of the last couple of years, as our capital budget has grown, the default equalizing mechanism has been debt. And to continue down the road of using that as the default to make up for the difference of the larger capital budgets would be unsustainable. We did take corrective actions this year to look at only using debt for larger projects where we're receiving funding from the feds or the province. We noted that there are operating and capital reserve deficiencies that will need to be addressed during the term. I note that a principal recommendation of the CIP plan was to identify new opportunities for capital reserve renewal to ensure sufficient balances are available to fund CIP projects from year 2 onward. The CIP 5-year plan did not include funding for any of the following. We know that with the provincial legislation, there's significant upgrades to our buildings for accessibility requirements. You will see in the operating budget, subject to council approval, monies to do a stormwater master plan. That will come with a 10-year scope of recommendations as to what's to be done, and that hasn't been factored into the CIP plan. The Donald Hiltz, there's about another $5 million worth of work above ground to build that road. We will be seeking federal and provincial support for a portion of that, but we will also be required to fund our portion, and it doesn't factor in any of the costs associated with construction of a regional recreation facility. So those would all be over and above the $26 million plan. Just a few of the concerns that the residents have raised. The town does nothing to earn D-transfer tax revenue. I've always looked at D-transfer as a buy-in to the existing infrastructure in a community. So when you move to Kentville, you have not just full use of all of the core infrastructure of roads, water, and sewer, but extensive trail system, recreation, and leisure opportunities. So I would view a D-transfer tax as a buy-in to those facilities. It is a hidden tax. 47 out of 49 municipalities currently have a D-transfer tax in Nova Scotia, and they include HRM and CBRM. So for well over 90% of the population, D-transfer would be a known commodity. D-transfer tax is regressive. It uses the same principle as property tax. You have an established rate and you apply it to value. And the idea would be that the wealthier individuals would purchase higher value properties, and thus they would pay more tax. So the premise that it is regressive, I don't see that. The deed-transfer tax will lead to people choosing to live in another municipality. Excuse me. Kings County does not have a deed-transfer tax. The town of Kentville does not have a deed-transfer tax. The best comparator that we could look at would be Wolfville. And when you look at the population growth in Wolfville between 2006 StatsCan census and 2021, it grew from 3,772 to 3,057, or 34%. During that same period, town of Kentville population grew from 5,815 to 6,330, or 14%. That is not to say that there are not other components that lead to growth in community, but it wouldn't appear that the deed-transfer tax was a significant deterrent to growth in the town of Wolfville, even though both Kentville and Kings County do not have a deed-transfer tax. And how much revenue could the deed-transfer tax generate in Kentville? By not implementing the deed-transfer tax, the town has foregone between $2,610,000 and $3,915,000 over the last 5 years. The difference is associated with applying a 1% or a 1.5% deed-transfer tax. So, three recommendations. One would be that council consider approving second reading of the deed-transfer tax. The other two are policy, and we wouldn't be looking for a motion tonight on this. It requires 7 days notice, but we did want to have the discussion because we see them as being all tied together, and we would see them coming forward at the next council meeting to be ratified. And one establishes interest rate. The other is where administration is recommending that the proceeds of deed-transfer tax be deposited into the general capital reserve to offset the cost of capital projects. That is not a requirement, but as we have seen, there's going to be substantial pressures on the capital budget over the next number of years. Happy to try and answer any questions that council may have.
All right, council, if you have any questions directed to the CAO. No. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to the CAO. CAO Lawrence, one of the notes that you made in the memo that came out to us April the 29th was around the municipality of the County of Kings that's next to us essentially can afford not to access this fund, but other towns in Nova Scotia do collect a deed-transfer tax. Can you just maybe give a little bit of rationale to that statement as to why they necessarily don't need to implement the such tax?
So I would start by saying we have a very good relationship with Kings County. They're good neighbors. This isn't specific to them, but there are a number of drivers and towns that the counties do not necessarily face. So a large portion of the roads in the county provides a portion of the funding, but the province provides a lot of the funding for their maintenance and upkeep. So that is paid for by provincial taxes, which county residents and town residents contribute to. When you look at all of our in-town infrastructure, roads, sidewalks, that is paid for by town of, I almost said Antigonish, I apologize for that.
That's all right.
Town of Kentville residents alone. We're not subsidized by the province or by other municipalities for that. When you look at some of the grants that are provided for infrastructure, and I'll use gas tax because I've been around long enough that I can't get my head around the new acronym for it. But there's three components, and two of those three components are dwelling units and population. So in towns, they're all fully serviced. The counties would get the same amount of monies because of a dwelling unit or population, regardless of whether they provide any services in the area. So certainly around the urban centers, they provide services, a full suite of services, but as you move towards the outskirts, they don't. And another piece is, when you look at bridges in towns, you get cost sharing if they're on collector or arterial roads, but if they're on a local street, they're 100% paid for by towns. But if they're in the counties and they're in a rural area, then that is a TIR responsibility. So it's just a difference in the drivers.
Okay.
It's not specific to Kings, it's just some of the financial pressures that towns face, that rurals face slightly different pressures. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you. I do have another one, but I'm sure other people do around the horseshoe, so I'll wait till they're done.
Counselor Zabia.
Thank you. Thanks, Theo. I have a question, and I'm not sure if now's the right time or if we want to ask the director. Our reserve account, we usually, from what I remember, I think we usually put in about 400,000 roughly a year, and then we get the new acronym. It's going to come to me, Canadian Community Building. I got that far. Fund. I got it. The new gas tax acronym. We get around 400 there, right? Roughly. Is that? Am I
Yeah,
right?
I think you're in, yep.
So we're around 800-ish we put in that account annually. Between that and between our tax dollars we put in. Okay. Okay, all right. I'll let you check and then. I'm gonna memorize that acronym.
I can check exactly.
Okay.
But you're in the
In that
ballgame.
ballpark, okay.
Yeah, you're in the
So
ballpark.
my other question is, and I was looking at the document that we were reviewed yesterday, I think it was yesterday or Saturday, one day's running into the next. Are we still putting money in that reserve account? I know that the Canadian Community Building Fund is gonna come regardless, but are we still putting tax dollars in there? Cause I was trying to figure out the math of how those projections, those forecasts, it would be nice to see the ins and outs, cause it's hard for me to understand how those numbers come to be.
Sure.
And the other thing was, the other reserves that are there are all the same for the 5 years. Those should be changing too, I would presume, right?
They should what?
The capital one, I know you've got the projections for the 5 years, but all the other reserves, like, they're the same for each year.
So if you're talking about the
Like
water
water
or
and
the
sanitary,
sewer,
yeah.
we haven't, those budgets haven't been presented to council, so
Okay,
they would be
so they're just,
updated.
okay,
They would be updated as part of the budget process.
okay. And I had another question too, but you know what, jump around and I'll come back in a second. Thank you.
All right. Counselor Maxwell.
Thank you. I don't know really where to start, but I'll start with 7 years ago when I brought this to council, and I wanted council to consider detransfer tax. And why I wanted council to do that was because I could easily see, when I first came here as a councillor, that our recreational infrastructure was deteriorating. And I could also see and know that as well, what was underneath the ground had been there forever. And just in asking the, people at the time, it was like, we're gonna live within our means. In other words, we get so much money on tax and we get so much for grants and we gotta live within that means. And the thing was, previous councils have been doing that, but if you were living within your means and you were able to look after the infrastructure in the town, it should have been looked after. And so I shouldn't have come in here with poor tennis courts, a swimming pool that was ready to be closed, and a rink that was ready to be torn down. And so I could see that that was a problem, and we don't save money for that. And I thought, we need to start putting money away because we might want to build a recreation center, we might want to rebuild a rink, and so on. And just with the stats that that our staff has given us here, it's interesting to note that it says over the past few years, we would have a conservative estimate of how much revenue could have been generated over the past few years is $650,000 annually. So if we multiply that by 7 years, that is $4.5 million. That had we put this deed transfer tax in place when I brought it to council, we would have had $4.5 million that we could have put to, and let's look at it, the rink, the pool. It would have been part of a one-third grant that we do with provincial and federal and so on, and we would have been able to do something. We can't do anything right now. Nothing. If something big goes wrong in any of those facilities or underground, we don't have the revenues to fix something big in infrastructure. We just need to look at the splash pad a few years ago. It's easy to figure that out now, but we didn't have the money in the budget to fix it then, so that had to stay closed for a whole summer until we had a new budget and we could fix it. So what happens if we open the rink this winter and something major has gone wrong with the cement and the piping underneath the cement, like happened in Kingston one year? It means we shut the rink and there's no rink in Kentville? Same thing, what if we go down and we open the pool and something major happens with the pump, or that leak is so bad there's no way we can do anything about it? We don't have a pool in Kentville anymore? So I think this is a really way past due for us to do this. And I feel that we need to look at the future of this town, not the 4 years within which we are elected, but we need to start looking at the future and planning for the future. And I think part of planning for the future and doing it well is making sure that we can have that stormwater management plan and we can fulfill that plan every so many years, and we can do a certain segment and so on. We can look after and have enough in our reserves that we can handle major infrastructure problems with our recreation facilities. And so really it upsets me when I look at this 4.5 million and just shake my head and go, yeah, and we get nothing right now. So I think as council around this table, we need to look at the future of our town and not what's going to happen within the next year or so with an election. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can do this through to the CAO, but probably better served if I do it through the Director of Finance. So you're up there, okay. So this is as per the April 29th memo that was set out. There was a section in there for financial condition indicators. And it was talking about, for reference, that included charts from the 5-year CIP highlighting debt and reserves. So I was trying to figure out with that, when those financial condition indicators were being calculated, was the debt issue assuming the 6 million in grants, or was it not assuming 6 million in grants?
It assumed we would get the 6 million in grants.
So the debt
So-
issue, yeah,
The debt issue is lower than it would be if we did not receive those grants and had no other source of financing.
okay. So those could change.
They could.
Yeah, okay, thank
Yes.
you. Yeah.
So that projection we tried to, and that is over 10 years. They were all
Yes.
assumed over 10 years.
Yes, okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome. And if I might, you were pretty spot on, Councillor Zabian. I have too many pages that look alike. So throughout the course of the plan, we have 413,100 being transferred from operations, so at a general tax revenue to capital. And we left that consistent because we haven't approved an operating budget.
Okay.
And the gas tax has actually gone up some. It's
Okay.
481. And as part of our capital investment plan, we were moving around 60,000 for transportation equipment, and council agreed to increase that to 215,000 to ensure that that covers the needs over the 5-year plan. So those values are going in, and then the projected expenditures in the capital investment plan have come out, and the net is the 900 that CAO spoke of.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Councillor York.
Thank you. When I'm looking at all of the correspondence that we've received, I think it would be a little bit silly to say that people are only choosing the town of Kentville to do business or to live because we don't have a deed transfer tax. I hardly think that's the reason why we've seen the increase in the growth that we have. I do have one concern, and that is for people who are downsizing and staying within the town of Kentville, who've already contributed to the town and to the infrastructure. Is there a way with a deed transfer tax to allow for people to downsize without having to pay that deed transfer tax, or is it a cut and dry, black and white, you buy, you pay?
So I may look to Jeff for confirmation, but my first instinct would be you have to treat everybody the same whether they're a resident or not a resident. So one of the advantages of the detransfer tax is it's not the same individuals that pay property taxes, but they're not completely exclusive either. There would be a group that decided to relocate within the town of Kentville that would be required to pay the detransfer tax, but there would be a greater group that would be buying into the existing infrastructure. It's not perfect,
Right.
but it also is, there's a number of pieces that we have looked at to try and meet our capital needs in the future. And one we addressed, which is trying to jump up the transfers to cover what we expect to be the requirements for public works equipment or police vehicles. Another one is discussions about our reserve from sale of the electric utility and what is the sustainable load that we could look at on that. So we're looking under all options. It's not just that this is the one piece that's going to solve all of our problems, but again, we do know that even with the 26 million, there's challenges, and those other bubbles that I talked about, pieces of that will land on our table. A long answer to your question. It's not a perfect solution, but it does, the groups are not, it's not the same taxpayer that pays the property taxes that would be paying the
Okay.
transfer tax.
Thank you.
Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. I got a couple of questions. Is it not common practice for municipalities to have reserves for their assets, whether they be below ground, above ground? And I guess, to follow up on that, did we used to do it and we don't do it anymore, or have we never done it?
We have reserves and we have had reserves. The amount of the capital investment plan has increased substantially. Part of the reason Councillor Maxwell touched upon. We're trying to be more proactive in dealing with our assets and infrastructure renewal. When you go from a 5-year capital investment plan that's probably around the $10 million area to a $26 million area, then that changes your reserve balances. But there are financial indicators that the province puts out every year, and I believe in her capital investment plan, Wanda referenced that we will be required to increase the minimum threshold for operational reserves from about 1.5 to 1.6, I can't remember the exact number, just to get into the moderate reserve category. And it would be probably closer to $3 million to bring us up to where the province likes to see us, and the same in the capital. Now, in Cumberland, a number of years ago, the province, and not that many years ago, within the last 10 years, the province went in and said, your reserves aren't sufficient, you need to generate more revenue, and that resulted in a significant increase to their property tax. So we do have to be mindful that we have what are sufficient reserves to look after our infrastructure. Does that answer?
It does, but it leads me to my next question, which is, do we have our asset management plan? The mayor and I went to a conference 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and so for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been saying, so this is one piece of it, is to build up the reserves, but is that asset management plan ever gonna come to fruition, or?
So you do have an asset management plan. I haven't gotten into the nuts and the bolts of it myself. I do believe there's more work that has to be done on it to get to the level of detail to be able to build a capital plan out of that. But you do have a significant amount of the work towards an asset management plan that has been developed.
Okay, and I guess my last comment would be, I think these are downfalls of maybe this council, previous councils, whatever. I think as a business owner, I have to be charging for my gear, and I have to always be thinking, these are gonna need to be replaced. The pipes in the ground need to be replaced. I think this is an issue of council and this building, and I don't think we should penalize either people that move within the town or new people moving to the town with a tax like this. It would be different, I think, if we had a plan on bringing something new to town, a wellness center, whatever you want to call it, and say, you know, all taxpayers are going to pay a tax towards this. But, you know, just, these are maintenance issues. This isn't we're going to have a brand new big whatever. And I have a real problem charging a tax for that, especially in the climate we're in today when we're just taxed to death from the feds, right? You know, there's talk of, you know, there's money coming from the feds in the province. It's all our money. It just depends on what pocket they're taking it out of to give it back to us. Thank you.
Counselor Huntley.
Thank you. I just have a couple questions. One is, and I can't remember the amount, Bill 340 with the CERMGAR agreement. There was a couple of things that we were going to be able to save money on. Do you know how much that was and if it's started yet?
I could stand corrected, but I believe it will start this year, and
Okay.
I believe it's worth approximately 300,000
Yep. Okay.
plus to the town of Kentville a year.
Thank you. And my second question is thinking about, I'm going to call it the gas tax like you do. Right now, the money's handed over to us. With the, I know it could be a change in government, could be the same, I'm not sure, but everybody seems to be looking at the money belt. And I'm wondering, have you heard anything that maybe they're going to hold municipalities to the belt a little different? So instead of just giving them the money, maybe they could say something like, you need to do these 3 things in order to get your gas tax. Have you ever heard any changes coming, or?
I haven't heard anything about that, and the gas tax actually comes from the federal government.
Yep.
It doesn't come through the province.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Zabian?
Thank you. We're not in debate
No,
mode, we're
we're
just
not.
questions. That's what I
It's
thought.
questions to the
That's
CAO,
what I
very
thought, yeah.
specific. I realize we're going a little
little
broader.
broad, yeah.
I've given some latitude
I
here
saw
on that.
that.
But yes,
Just
please.
a question, or I guess, and I know you can't speak for past practice, but as this council, are we approving capital budgets that are beyond our means? Because, and I only say that last year you weren't here, we had, I think, one of the biggest, because that to me looks like what the problem is. You know, I understand things are going up, everything's going up, I totally understand that. But all of a sudden now, this is a problem when it hasn't been for years. So I'm wondering, is that part of the problem? Because if so, then we should fine tune, and we really should be looking at the operational budget before we look at this. It's kind of put in the cart, or the horse before the cart. I'm just wondering is that what we're doing? Are we setting ourselves up for a fall?
So that's almost the juxtaposition to what Councillor Gerard had referenced, that we should be putting in place good plans and funding depreciation, which is really the way you would do it with a water utility or another utility. And we haven't done this historically, nor have most municipalities in Nova Scotia. There is a push with the new financial regulations to better account for depreciation and write-off, and that may well be coming. But this is something that you're seeing across the way. As you develop these asset management plans, it is of no benefit to develop a plan and then not fund it. And historically in Nova Scotia, and I've been in this role or a similar role for going on 28 years. It would have been when the pool breaks, you deal with fixing it, or when a street reaches a certain level that it's not drivable anymore, then you would potentially look at a rebuild, or you wouldn't because you couldn't get the funding for it. So I think part of it is that there's a lot of catch-up for a lot of municipalities to do, and part of it is that there's now more of a push to be more proactive in dealing with it and addressing. And when you've had deficiencies for a lot of years, and then you're moving to a new role, it creates a transition period that can come with some significant costs.
No, and I can appreciate that. I guess when I think of a pool breaking or a rink or anything, sometimes you've got to fix the pool, but you can't fix the kitchen, and that's where my mindset is. You can't do everything at once. So sometimes priorities have to come first, and I mean, definitely the pool would be a priority to me, but there are things that probably aren't priorities as a council collectively, and that may be where very well the problem has been for the last, and I'm not going to blame past councils because we're the ones who approved the last 3 budgets, and this is going to be our 4th. So I just think that, to me, that looks like it's, you know, and I understand that maybe we haven't kept up with a lot of the infrastructure for sure. I can appreciate that too. But I mean, this isn't a huge amount that we're looking to collect. I'll wait till we get into debate mode. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, you have spoken twice on this. Do you have a direct question for CAO?
Yep, the direct question is with regards to the percentage. The percentage does not have, sorry, through the chair, the percentage does not have to form part of the motion, correct? That is something that is discussed afterwards when we're talking policy, or?
So, the bylaw percentage has to be established by bylaw. It cannot be established by policy. That was part of the discussion between our solicitor and myself last time. Some municipalities have it in there that.
Say that again, it has to be part of the,
It has to be amended, it's set by bylaw and it has to be amended by bylaw. It can be amended, it's just
Okay.
a bylaw revision and not just a policy motion, so.
okay, thanks.
Councillor Maxwell.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure who can answer this question, maybe the mayor or the CAO or the finance person, but I think it's hard to look after assets when your money is low. I'm wondering when the last time was that the town of Kentville had a tax increase.
2020, 2021.
And before that, was there,
Okay, just give me a sec, I can give you the real numbers. So our tax, the town of Kentville has maintained a stable tax rate since 2021, when it was actually lowered to $1.4081. Prior to that, it was 1.4251 cents.
okay, so it was lowered in 2021. When was the last time we had an increase?
Prior to that would have been in 2019.
2019. So basically, this house, because I look at my house, and I have to cut back like everybody else has to cut back. And the town of Kentville is no different. With inflation, everybody has had issues. We're trying to operate a very large house here. We haven't kept pace with inflation since well before 2019. That's a political move. That's what politicians do to try to get reelected. They don't want to do tax increases. And so let's be honest. You know, let's put the honesty out here. We have not taken care of our house. We have not kept pace with the inflation. And so you can't expect that we're going to be able to look after everybody in the house if we don't have the revenue. Now, it was interesting. On Friday, April 26th, in the paper, Mayor Mike Savage was giving his swan song speech because he's retiring. And he made a couple of really interesting points. His were around infrastructure, but he was talking mostly about housing infrastructure, which we also deal with, by the way. And Halifax does have a deed transfer tax, and we don't. So we want to keep that in mind. But he said, growth doesn't pay for growth. In other words, you can keep building houses here, and we're not going to be able to keep pace through the taxation system to look after the infrastructure that we're building and what people need and want. He said, another big issue for the next council is a fundamental change in the way cities or municipalities are funded. This is Halifax with a deed transfer already. And they're talking about, we still can't keep pace. You know, we still can't keep pace here. And, you know, I think that it would, you know, to say that, you know, put the blame, I think the blame goes on inflation, I think it goes on politics. No, we don't want to raise the tax because we might not get reelected. But again, I'm saying, we have to look at the future of this town. And if I'm passionate, if I sound passionate, I am. I was born in the hospital here. I was raised here. I was educated here. I'm now a senior here. And the last thing that I want to see is for our town to end up with buildings and, town office spaces and businesses boarded up and our infrastructure falling and being decrepit. Because then, yes, nobody's going to want to move here, deed transfer tax or not. And we've been told many, many times that people move here for the services we provide. And if we don't keep providing those services at a standard that people want, then yes, they're not moving here. And that's why I'm asking, we need to think about the future of this town, not the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, CAO, thank you very much for that presentation, and I'm going to assume that your recommendations remain the same, and that the recommendation is that council provides second reading to the deed transfer tax bylaw. So the motion is that council approves second reading of the deed transfer tax bylaw. Someone could move that, please? Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Maxwell, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve second reading of the deed transfer tax bylaw. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Deputy Mayor, go ahead. Oh, sorry, no, you're not. Councillor Zabian, sorry.
Thanks, Mayor Snow. I want to thank CEO and all the staff involved in bringing this report forward. I don't have anything prepared, so I'm just going to go on the flip, which is not always good for me. But I understand what deed transfer tax is. I understand that we're the only one of 2 units in the whole province that don't collect it. I understand that, and on paper, we probably should have been collecting it a long time ago. But I do have a problem with it. We're in bed, literally, the county is right around us. So let's just put some synopses or scenarios, I guess, on the table. If I was looking at 2 properties in the county and in Kentville, and I knew I had to pay $10,000, it could change my mind, and I know it has. I've talked to a lot of realtors, but that's not the only reason why I'm not for this right now. Last year, you'll all remember, we sat around here and we got 1.4 million, I believe, in tax dollars because assessments went up. Money that we didn't budget for, money we didn't anticipate. It was like the lottery came. And I sat here and I said to everybody, should we reduce the tax rate? And, not a good idea to reduce taxes. And I understand that, and we kept them status quo, and I'm thankful for that. But that's 1.4 million that we got yet last year that we didn't have. And maybe that should have been earmarked for the pool or the rink. I don't know. Obviously, we've exhausted that now, and somehow. So my concern is now we're going to collect $500,000 this year, and next year and the year after, and whatever have you. I don't see it going into a special project like an arena or whatever the case may be. And that's where a lot of deeds, from what I've read, a lot of deed taxes go there. That's where they save them so that in 20 years, they have so many millions saved up. I have to go back to what I said a half an hour ago. I think we are overspending just in the last couple of years, whether it's operational or capital. I think there's been some changes, and I know last year when we looked at both of those budgets, I questioned them. You can go back and review, and maybe it's time to go into that operational budget before we pass it. And I know there was some drastic changes last year, some very high-scale changes in some of those departments that skyrocketed. And you will find a lot of the money that we're looking for now that we're going to anticipate has gone into those categories. And I mean, we can pull that up when the time comes. I'm just not comfortable. I'm not comfortable with this right now. I'm going to be honest with you. I know it looks good, and I know we probably should have it in place, but I can't support this, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I'm going to read this because I did write something out, so I hope that's okay. It's just easier for me to put it onto paper. So we are elected, obviously, to make tough fiscally prudent decisions. And these decisions should always be in the best interest of our citizens. We will never, absolutely never please everyone. Tonight's second reading on transfer tax is a very important discussion and decision. I've given this due consideration and have the following remarks, and I'll keep them short. Kentville is growing, but our capital reserves are not growing with the pace of Kentville. It's imperative that we keep our existing infrastructure up to date and safe. We need to carry out improvements and maintenance. We can and will direct growth to areas that are already serviced, so even more emphasis will be placed on aging infrastructure. We will have more housing with more connectivity in areas that require new infrastructure. And although grants may be available, we need capital raised to accommodate these growth areas. Town of Kentville is undergoing a stormwater management master plan, and we don't know what sort of funds this report will recommend to be injected into our town. Transfer tax is a transaction-based tax, and of the 49 municipalities, 47 use it, excuse me. When a new resident buys a property, they have the privilege of using existing infrastructure, leisure, recreation, etc., and that the current taxpayer is paying for. It's a cost to buy in versus, it appears fair to implement a transfer tax as opposed to an increase in the general tax rate. And the mayor talked about what those tax rates were. And there's been no changes since those times. We have an ambitious capital investment plan just north of 26 million. So a recommendation to place these funds into our capital reserves is, in my opinion, the fiscally responsible thing to do. If not now, then when? I certainly understand interest rates are high and therefore barriers to entry are high as well. But leaving any kind of additional revenue on the table does not make financial sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to say one thing. So far tonight, all the solutions to get us out of, a problem that we appear to have put ourselves in is a one-way street, but it's not. We have to start doing a better job at spending taxpayers' money responsibly. And I'm not going to mention anything we've spent the money on in the past, but we have to be careful. We're the people that take responsibility for this money, and when you put in things that are big city things or things that a lot of the population doesn't want just because, and those things cost millions of dollars, or when you plan on looking at spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a building because of something that's going to come to fruition in 2030, we've got to be better advocates of what we spend. So I just want to say that getting ourselves into a better position with reserves is not just a one-way street of just taxing people into submission. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I've heard all of the political talk. Kentville needs to be a modern, viable town with good infrastructure, good parks, good recreational services. It needs to be accessible. It needs to be inclusive. And when a town isn't that way and they try to live on a shoestring, we just need to look west and see what happens. Kentville is my town. 1.4 million was a one-time thing. 4.5 million over 7 years would have made a huge difference today had we looked at that harder 7 years ago when I brought it forward. We need to plan for the future. We can't keep ourselves stuck in the past. If Halifax is having a hard time coming up with funds to look after the city, and they have a deed transfer tax, what are we doing? I have been asked so many times, how come Berwick can do this? And how come Berwick can do that? And how come Berwick can have a recreational center? And how come Berwick can have a splash pad? And how come Berwick? Berwick has a deed transfer tax. And they've had it for quite a while. All right? Berwick also has a very good supportive community. I think that it's very important that we look at the fact that we and Kings County are the only ones without this tax. And yet, and this has been for quite a few years, and yet nobody, no other municipal unit in this province has axed the tax. None of them are suffering from people moving out, from businesses moving away. None of them. I don't see too many people flocking out of Windsor to Kentville, and I don't see too many people flocking out of Truro or Bridgewater. Annapolis is considered a recreational facility. All these places have that extra income stream, and Kentville doesn't. And to me, that is a shame, because we're holding our town back, and we're holding our citizens back. And to make a statement that nobody wants, nobody wants, have you done a poll? Have you asked the people what they want and what they don't want? We certainly know what they don't want, but do people know what they want to go without? Because I asked that on social media and I didn't get any answers. What do you want to do without? People still want the services, and we've got to provide them. And we've got to look to the future. And I don't want to be upset and disappointed with my town. The town I love and grew up in. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor York.
Thank you. Some of the spending that we have on the horizon are rather non-negotiable. So the 2030 deadline is about access and accessibility. So those are things that we are already taxing all of our citizens anyway, but if they do not have full access to our town buildings, then we're doing a massive disservice, and it's a human right to be able to access those things. So that 2030 deadline is looming on the horizon, absolutely, but it's about accessibility and human rights, and those things are non-negotiables in my opinion, and also like human rights councils. We all around this table and in this room want the best for the town of Kentville. How we get there might differ, based on our opinions. Regardless, we need more money, I think, is the crux of this sort of equation, is that we are spending more, or we're going to be needing more than what we have. So how we get there is perhaps up for debate. I'm not entirely sure, but is there an option, or is there a way that we can look at comparables for what in a blanket-wide town increase on commercial and residential tax increase would be, and what that burden would be on every individual versus what the, I'm saying burden, there should be air quotes around that, what the burden would be on a town-wide implementation of a tax rate increase versus a town-wide implementation of a deed transfer tax, so that we can see a cost comparable for what we would bring in and generate, and then also what people would be on the hook for as an option. I recognize that is a ton of work at a very busy time for you, so my apologies, but I'm wondering if that's an option so that people can see what we're actually going to be dealing with, and is a deed transfer tax, though perhaps loathsome by some, the lesser of two evils.
So if you look at the deed transfer tax conservatively generating $650,000 a year, I'm not sure what 1 cent on the commercial and residential rate generates as far as revenue, but that would be the calculation.
Isn't residential around 40?
No, it's higher than that
Is it
now.
higher now?
Yeah, it's higher than that.
In the 40s, right?
Yeah, it's almost 70,
Is it
70, say 70K.
These are not numbers I keep in my head.
So that would be quite a jump then.
Right.
To get that.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
And that jump would be felt universally,
Yes.
right,
At all levels.
And-
at all levels,
And
correct?
year over year over year.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah.
just checking.
All right. Okay, so as all of you know, I love my data, and so I spent this afternoon looking at data, and some of it I was really quite surprised at. So as you all know, one of the things that I've always talked about with Kentville is growth and prosperity. The other thing that I've learned through time and through training with Councillor Gerard is that we also have to consider sustainability. And the de-transfer tax was introduced by the Nova Scotia government in the late 1990s as an additional means of revenue for municipalities, prior to which we were limited to property taxes and our own source revenues. Over the last 8 years in the town of Kentville, our uniform assessment has increased from about $480 million to just under $685 million. So, over that same period, our actual tax revenue has remained fairly stable, just short of 9 million. So even though this has gone up, when you start looking at things like CAP and you start looking at the properties that we give tax breaks to, this has really affected our bottom line. So when you look at what we're generating from our tax revenue, it's around $9 million, and we're making up all the shortfall with our own revenue and with grants that we're getting. So our operational budget during the same time period has remained fairly stable as well. So from 17-18, we had a $13 million budget. In 23-24, we had a $16 million budget. So that's basically $500,000 a year has increased in operations over that's 6 years, so $500K a year. And we continue to provide the same services, and think about the amount of how much things have gone up in this time period. So the other thing as well is that we've continued to make investments in the town annually of over $2 million. Regardless of how much we plan to spend, we've typically spent only around $2 million a year. And our tangible capital assets have continued to grow. They're currently around $43 million based on our last financial statements. Our infrastructure, as valued by our asset management program, is in the rough order of $178 million. So the town of Kentville, the taxpayers in this town, over the years have invested over $200 million in this town. So when you think about de-transfer tax, somebody new coming to town, and I realize it affects people who are moving house to house or the flippers, but at the same time, they're buying into this $200 million that's already been invested in the town. So our capital expenditures are typically paid for through borrowing, grants, and reserves. The borrowing is done through the Nova Scotia government at a preferred rate through debentures. Our grants come from both the federal and the provincial government, the FCM and the NSFM. Reserves are generated through specific savings by the town, and typically the difference between the annual revenue and the expenses used to top up that reserve. But let me go back to that statement where I said that despite how much our town has grown, we're still only getting about $9 million worth of tax revenue. So prior to 2020, the council had committed to investing about $1 million of our own source reserve funds in capital investment. So think about Burke subdivision. What did it cost us to do Burke subdivision? That was $1 million to do that entire subdivision, and that was the 3 layers. Water, sewer, and storm drain and pavement. Let's go up to McDonald. 3 times as much is what it cost us to do the same amount 2 years gone. How is that possible, other than the fact that we were dealing with after COVID and the crazy inflation that's hit our world? And you know, it's a world problem. It's not a Kentville problem, but we're dealing with it. And so we haven't adapted to all of these things. So we have weathered the changes post-COVID, inflation, the effects of climate change, and we realized that we needed to commit more capital to sustain our current infrastructure and to build new infrastructure to encourage growth. The current reserve funding methodology is no longer meeting our capital needs as we continue to grow and invest in infrastructure and capital assets. Additionally, when you think about building permit values in this town, in 2011, it was $5 million. In 2023, it was $18 million, and we did have a high of $26 million of building permit values in 2021. So we've had some incredible growth. And when you look at, as Councillor Maxwell has pointed out, the services that we have in this town, the infrastructure that we have, that people, as soon as they buy a lot, it's right there for them. So these private investments depend on the town's infrastructure and capital investment. The deed transfer is a means of funding our capital reserves, in addition to our current methodology. It is the buy-in to cover that over $200 million capital investment taxpayers have already made in this town. Deed transfer tax has not impeded investment or development in the 47 municipalities in Nova Scotia that have deed transfer tax. The town of Kentville has maintained a very stable tax rate since 2021 at $1.40, at $1.4081, and a commercial rate of $3.283. Berwick, by comparison, just put their tax rate down 2 cents. It is now $1.558, and their commercial rate is $3.870. Wolfville, again, is looking at a tax decrease, and theirs is going down to $1.475 and a commercial rate of 3.575. So through all of this, Kentville is still very, very good value, even with a deed transfer tax. So I'm asking you that we look at the future, we look at the sustainability of our town, and we vote to apply a deed transfer tax. Is there any further discussion? Are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to approve second reading of the deed transfer tax bylaw. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Now, with every good thing also comes homework. So there are 2 policies within your package tonight. Both of those policies will be going to council meeting in May. So if you have any changes that you wish to make to those 2 policies, please have the details into the deputy clerk by close of business on May 15th. So that's any changes to the policies to deputy clerk by May 15th. As council must have 7 full days prior to these coming to council for review. Deputy Mayor?
With regards to those policies, I'm assuming that if we have any recommendations around changes, those have to be vetted through the solicitor, or?
No, even though I bragged about having 27 years' experience in municipal government, the timeline for adopting policy escaped me, and the solicitor was good enough to remind me, but there is a 7-day requirement.
Okay.
So the biggest point is to make sure that I have given council 7 days' notice before the council meeting in May. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on to our next, Councillor Maxwell?
The 2 policies that are in our package?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you can just redline them and send them off to deputy clerk if you have any changes. And please,
Okay.
by close of business, May 15th. And if there are nil returns, then we will assume that everyone is happy with them, and they will go before council at the end of May.
Okay.
All right, our next matter is the spring debenture issuance. We have a recommendation from the Director of Finance to approve the spring debenture issuance. CAO, did you want to go into any details on that, or are we good to go?
Your worship, this is fairly routine for debenture. They were previously approved. I wasn't going to provide any input. but-
Okay, perfect. All right, so then if we take the Director of Finance's recommendation, turn it into a motion that council approve the spring debenture issuance as follows. TBR-08-23-0055-01, various, for $868,700, and further, TBR 08-23-0056-01, sanitary sewer, $180,000, for a total debenture of $1,048,700. Someone could move. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor Zabian, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve the spring debenture issuance as follows. 0055-01, various at $868,700, and further 0056-01, sanitary sewer at $180,000 for a total debenture of $1,048,700. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to approve the debenture issuance as follows. TBR 005501, various at $868,700, and further, TBR 0056-01, sanitary sewer at $180,000 for a total debenture of $1,048,700. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and the motion is carried. Thank you. We have no recommendations arising from the CAC meeting held on the 8th of April, so that moves us right into our recommendations and our reports, and the first report is Councillor Gerard.
Your worship, the only thing I had in the last month was Police Commission, and I assume Chair York is going to give a fulsome report.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Huntley?
Thank you. Last council meeting, March 25th, and the last CAC, April 8th. Under committee meeting attendance, there was a special council meeting so we could discuss capital budget. Has been no quarterly meetings yet. They're not due till early May. March 25th, joint fire, Kentville Fire Department operating budget meeting. And on March 28th, for the Divert Nova Scotia, there was a board meeting. Going into Kentville's events, I attended the ratepayers meeting for Kentville Fire Department. There was a lunch and learn held here at Chambers for info on grants available regarding improving accessibility for local businesses with a guest speaker. And one of the ones that I want to talk about was the pathways to apprenticeship. The info is attached. I had approached Valley Wren about doing something to help either students or bring some information about the apprenticeship program. So they ran with it, and they also had a partnership with the Nova Scotia Apprenticeship Agency. It was a great day at the Kentville Fire Hall. There were students who actually appeared with their teachers. There was 34 people who were interested in the info session, and 13 employers and supporting partners had tables set up with many requests of, is it going to be held in the fall? So I'm already talking to the Valley Wren about that for fall. And the costs were fairly low to hold this. So overall, it looked like it was successful. Kentville Home Show, that looked like it was a packed house. Attended the April 28th day of mourning at Memorial Park. Excuse me. The invitation came from the Annapolis Valley Labor Council, and that was a humbling meeting to go to for sure, and it was a day to listen to stories and to recognize for persons killed or injured in the workplace. There's other meetings listed here. The one that I really want to talk about was April 16th to the 19th, and that was the International Michelin Cities Conference held in Anderson, South Carolina. I have the schedule attached, but what I did was, sorry, let me get to it. So there's a trip report to fill out. So I thank you, Jennifer. I attended the conference at Anderson, South Carolina, which is held every 2 years. The conference was held April 16th to the 19th at assorted local buildings, universities, hosted by the city of Anderson. There was one counselor from the town of Kentville who attended the conference. It was attended by the mayor and deputy mayor of Kings County, 2 economic development representatives from the Valley Wren, and also a representative from NSCC, 11 mayors and 12 cities from around all the countries, and were over 90 people in attendance. The biggest thing on the day that we left, as I was probably excited to see all these people, I hitched a ride with a couple of partners, and we got on the highway and we got to Lower Sackville, and the driver fell asleep at the wheel. And we hit the concrete median, flipped on 2 wheels, and I don't know what kept our car from not flipping to its roof, and there was nothing coming to our right. So after that, I was kind of, well, I don't know what'll happen after this. It can't get any worse, so it's only going to get better. So we got there. It was all-day travel. The travel administration was supported by the town of Kentville. Accommodation, meals, shuttles, bus costs, everything was covered by Michelin. And the cost of the conference for flight was $29.77. The total cost of the trip was borne by the town of Kentville under legislative expense account number, and it was the total of $29.77. So every other expense was covered except for flight. Conference facilities, they were amazing. They tied all the booked spaces into how they incorporated their buildings into the city. The accommodation, I mean, they were all comfortable. The running joke was they really know how to do air conditioning down there because it's so warm, because the buildings are really cold inside. But the southern hospitality shown to us from all involved was to make you feel welcome to their home. And we walked to a lot of conferences, and we would get stopped by the residents, and they've been waiting for us. They've been years planning for this, and so it was nice to hear that they were all excited about it. Conference content, the attached schedules provide a brief overview of the general assemblies and subcommittee working groups. The briefings provided during the assemblies were informative, provided a good overview. There was a lot of common problem areas and of future thoughts, and they also provided insight into the direction planned by municipal units. Of particular interest, there were 2 speakers and economic equity labs held throughout the week. There was a couple of notes I put in, interesting ideas. The promotion of art and culture. It was amazing, and a bigger relationship is built with schools on how they can help their students to move to the workforce after their studies have finished. And their words are everywhere we went. What they talked about was equipping students with life after careers. They also started something this year, and it was called the Youth Peace Program. It's promoting civility to school children. Their goal is to starting young with education on equality, respect, kindness, and diversity to children. They had no notes on how it was going so far because it was fairly new. Ideas for consideration, there was a behavioral transit. It was quite interesting. They ran a pilot project that was free public transportation on the weekend. So it was started a Saturday morning and would end Sunday evening. And it was originally a project they started to help university students get around. There was no tickets or pass needed. They would just hop on and enjoy it. The project was run from September to June, and it started in 2017. So normally a pass is 49 euros a month, apparently equals to 75 Canadian a month. But what they learned was there was an 8% increase in ridership once the project was finished. The test was done in France, and of course it continues, and they saw it as quite a positive swing to help their transportation and transit around the city. They also had to put no more buses on or have extra drivers, with also seeing less cars and less accidents. They had a art residency project, so it's all about building the cultural and creative industries of tomorrow. So how it works is South Carolina, they would send one of their artists to France. The artist would have a grant, so at least it would cover the rent while they were away. This artist would work with 250 children, and the children would be taught by the artist how to do a mural. So they would work on it for 2 months, and it would be done in, let's say, squares of 12 by 12 or 11 by 17. And at the end of it would all come together, and the mural, like similar to we have murals, but everything was done by children. So it brings children into the art and culture of their city really early. So their passion grows, with them as they grow, which I thought it was wonderful. They do a lot of speak about Habitat for Humanity project, and of course, while we were there at the library getting a presentation, Michelin employees were there helping to build Habitat for Humanity. So they asked us to go out, sign a wall, sign wood that's being built, so it shows love from the community to the new owner. And when you go out, they were building it at the end of their parking lot in the library. And I could only imagine what type of bylaw adjustments they had to do to make sure that let's just make it work was kind of the spin of how they put on things. That was really interesting. They talk a lot about mentoring programs at large local companies. They look at things, their library programs, mobile library, Leap Station, and I know there's a book that I've dropped off. I think I left it in Jen's office, but I can pick it up and leave it on the table. Anyway, it has all their programs. It gives great ideas. And of course, when I came back, I had a short meeting with the director of Parks and Rec. And you might be able to do some ideas, from that trip. So stay tuned, I guess. And the other meeting that I'm having is with Lindsay, with the Economic Developer Coordinator, to give some ideas around what I saw and how we could grow. There's a lot more to it, but one of the recommendations, it asks, is it recommended that the town of Kentville continue to attend the Michelin Cities Conference? Cross-section attendance is extremely important, as contacting other counselors and staff facilitate the most ongoing processes. It was my first time ever. I didn't know what to expect when I arrived there. Most times when you hear the word Michelin, you think tires. That's what you think about. But Michelin, first of all, there was nobody from Michelin there. Their whole thing was to bring in countries who have Michelin in their backyard to thank them for supporting Michelin and just showing where Michelin is thinking and how everything their thoughts are doing are coming back to the communities, whether it's health, social. There are 6 things that they look at. They support schools. It's actually amazing. So the tech school that was there, 70% of the students that are there are almost getting free tuition, and they're leading them up to, with not a lot of co-op students, but they're leading them up to planning and helping them with a job outside. So let's say they brought us into a room where the students are building machinery, and one of the machines says Epson. And how everything was laid out, it was how the students wanted it to be. So initially you thought it was going to be a tic-tac-toe because you saw red and yellow, but it wasn't that way at all, and they had set up the machines to do everything differently. It was absolutely amazing, the creativity. So it's all about students. It's all about the students feeling the love and support. We then went to one of the universities. We had lunch there, but what they wanted to show us was, so for example, if they're thinking about students, of course, at this university, it's all about NCAA, all the basketball, the football, whatever's going on there. But they have a room there, and it's called the wellness program. And it looks like a smaller gym. What happens in there is all the athletes that might need muscle work done, recuperating, what they do then is they go to their kinesiology students, let's say the 3-year students, and they hire them and they bring them into the wellness program and get them to work on the students with the teachers. So they're ready to go and their learnings are progressing faster, and they're actually sometimes hired by the schools when it's all over. So what they're finding is there's a lot of students not moving away because they're feeling looked after in their studies. So I thought that was a pretty exciting thing. The other thing that I learned was, I don't hang out in the Valley Wren and I don't know what they're doing all the stuff they're doing in that building on economic development. So it was interesting to sit around a table with economic development officers from not just Kentville and Pictou and Bridgewater, but to listen to France and Spain and Canada, the rest of Canada who was there, of all the ideas. And now they were so excited about it that Kentville, Pictou, and Bridgewater will be doing a meeting of the minds starting May 9th. And I guess a lot of the work that they're going to be talking about will tie into the MIT REAP and Ag Accelerator corridor work that's already been done. So there's a speak that I look forward to listening to. But there's, wow. Not saying that I would ever have to go again because it's quite a big trip, but the learnings, I think, for everybody in that room that came out of it, it was absolutely amazing. And it was actually a very proud moment to see a Canada flag in that room, and everybody knew that who Canada was. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair to Councillor Huntley, I just had a couple of questions about your report. The Divert Nova Scotia Summit, so I did a little bit of research into that, environmental, economy, quality of life, working with Nova Scotians to reuse, et cetera. Is that a board that you're on through?
I'm on the Divert Nova Scotia board through NSFM.
Via NSFM?
Yep.
Okay.
They
And-
had a summit meeting that you're talking about. I didn't get to it because
Okay.
they rolled it out way too late. So he just gave me an overview of what the speakers talked about, ideas,
Okay.
around environment, involving schools,
Okay.
any new ideas that would come up. Yep.
So I know where you mentioned there, the ICD.D,
Yeah.
that is, somebody just came in and spoke to you about that, or?
No, that's something that Divert Nova Scotia enrolls you in. So there's a lot of like workshops, sessions that you can do, webinars. It gives you extra learning on board governance.
It's actual designation, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, and there's a lot of courses that are they charge for it, but I liked all the free stuff, so you can go on and look at the webinars. So I just got it, so we'll see now where that goes, so, yeah.
so you can actually get the designation through this Divert Nova Scotia?
Yep, they have to approve it if you want to go through the workshop.
Okay, thanks for that. Climate Caucus Hiring Committee?
Yep.
Is that also through NSFM?
No, that is a separate climate caucus. It has about 600 elected members, and it's a free session that I went on one time about 3 years ago, and there's a lot of people on it from New Brunswick and not too many from Nova Scotia, so they were looking for a board member, so I just said I'd be interested. And now, under the hiring committee, they need a new executive director, so we're doing some hiring for that.
Okay, and I just have one more question. The Pathways to Apprenticeship.
Yep.
Which is through the Valley Wren.
Yep.
Is that somehow linked with I think it was the 100 million that the province is doing, the investment into skilled workers program? Or is that separate?
This was something separate. This was just an information session to tell people about, let's say, for example, you're a 40-year-old person and you're thinking, I'd really like to better my education, I'd like to be an apprentice, but I don't want to go back to school.
Yeah, of course.
How do I
yeah.
do that?
Yeah.
So that's what this session was about. So
Okay.
when Nova Scotia Apprenticeship Agency was there, along with all the business sectors, Nova Scotia Power, they would all explain to what programs they had, and it was really an education piece for the community.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Councillor Sabian.
Thanks, Mayor Snow. Through the chair, if I may, to Councillor Huntley. Just a couple of questions regarding your trip. You said that the air cost was $29.77, so that's just the ticket? Very expensive to fly there. The other question I had was, you said that there were 90 people. Did you mean 90 people in total attended,
All I saw in the brochure was approximately 90 people.
including you and the whole, yeah, okay.
Yes, yes.
Um,
That doesn't count volunteers because they live
Right,
there. This is
okay.
just flying
People from
in.
outside,
Yeah.
okay. So that's from the 121 facilities Michelin has in 26 countries, I guess. And did you say a minute ago that nobody from Michelin was there?
No, the big head office
Right,
in the US.
okay.
They-
Nobody
that-
from
No,
outside?
that's not what they do. They
Okay.
don't show up. They want people to just be themselves.
Okay,
But when we did go to one university, the president showed up for a luncheon of Europe. He only stayed for about 20 minutes, but he had nothing to do with all the sessions. It was pretty much a thank you to all the towns. Appreciate, what you're doing to help us strive for, that sort of.
so these 11 mayors that went, do you know where they were from, or you?
I could get you
Yeah,
the list, but
just
there was
curious.
Spain, Puerto Rico, France, Germany, Frankfurt, Quebec, of course, Bridgewater, Kings County.
Right.
Yeah, they're, my
It just,
gosh,
it's,
amazing.
yeah, and it sounds like you got a lot of information from there. I just kind of wonder where it applies to Kentville, and I do understand, your recommendation to travel again, but when I look at that cost, I mean, I just have to put it out there. That's kind of like fixing some potholes, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not taking away, because we have a policy in place and we permit these travels, but it's a touchy subject, so thank you for that, though, I appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Maxwell, sorry, just hang on a second. Councillor
Thank you.
Maxwell.
Through the chair to Councillor Huntley. The 29.77, that was the flight. What was the conference fee?
It's free.
There was no conference fee, it's just an invite.
Oh, okay. So you had said it was for conference and flight, but, so there was no
Just
conference?
flight. Yeah.
It was
an
just
invite.
flight?
Yeah.
Is that economy or business class?
Oh, economy.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. I would
was-
suggest maybe the mayors were from the Michelin municipalities where Michelin is located, probably,
Yes.
around the
yes,
world.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you had said something about that it was, so, let me see, where did I put that? Something about the economic ideas and so on. But there were people there from the Ren, correct?
Yes, yes, two from Kentville.
Okay, so would they not, they would have brought that information back to the Ren, right? To the people that are on the Ren board. I would think they would be talking about what they,
Oh, I'm sure they
They
will.
gleaned.
I'm sure a report will come out.
right. And so I kind of have a feeling the same as Councillor Zabian on these conferences. And I think in my first year, first term, we didn't really know what any of this stuff was about. And so it was easy to vote people away, let them go. But I think after you've been through 4 years, you kind of get an idea. I think that you're no different than past councillors. Prior to my term of 8 years here on council, I think that there was an awful lot of traveling to conferences, and it wasn't just one person. It was quite a few people on council. But I think it's a policy, and I brought this up before, that I think we really need to review. I look at your learnings, and of course there's lots to learn there, but a lot of that stuff we know. It happens in our community. We hear about the arts and culture from KBC, and our transit company is trying all kinds of things, and I know that Acadia students were they were looking at, can we get a special fee for Acadie students driving the transit, and, Habitat for Humanity, we have that here. They've built just outside of Kentville. We have mentoring. We have library programs, mobile libraries, and things like that. So I really think that the learnings are probably more personal. It's not that it's something that the general population might not know. But I would also say that the college system in the US, the university system, is quite different than in Canada. And as far as the high schools go, we used to take quite a bit of pride in the fact that our Canadian education system is superior to the US. So I think that you would probably find that our schools are doing all of the peace and, the peace initiatives and things like that are going on. So really, I would encourage future council to take a look at that policy and do a review on it. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Maxwell, you're up for your report.
Oh, thank you. My report. I think I'm not on here. There we go. I was away for our last council meeting, and so I just included things that I had attended there, and that those were probably discussed by other members of council, so I won't go into the details on those. There hasn't been much since I've come back in the last couple of weeks, but the Heritage Committee did meet, and we passed the draft bylaw on to the CAO and solicitor for review. On March 11th, I did attend the provincial housing announcement by Minister Lohr, and I'm sure somebody here probably reported on that. It was interesting. March 4th, I did meet with MP Cody Blois and a group of caregivers with relatives who are in long-term care, who are concerned with government support for that service and just getting, it's not a service that the federal government is directly involved with, but it's something that we wanted to make him aware of, and maybe it's something that the federal government could weigh into at some future point. I also attended the home show, and I think it was very well done, and kudos to our organizing committee for the home show. There were certainly lots of people there when I attended, and I also picked up lots of information myself, so certainly worthwhile project. So that would be it for now. I did attend a trails meeting just recently, and I'll have that in my next report, but it was before after our reports had to be in. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. So March the 21st, I attended the Kentville Volunteer Fire Department, the operational budget discussions. I was there as a guest only, as I don't sit on that committee of council. March the 25th, we had, of course, our special council meeting where we reviewed the capital investment plan and the deed transfer tax where first reading passed. We did approve, as I mentioned earlier this evening and others around the horseshoe, that we approved a 5-year capital investment plan totaling just north of 26 million. And of course, there was a principal recommendation of the CIP to identify new opportunities for capital reserves renewal to ensure that we have adequate balances to cover future capital purchases. Same day, Kentville Volunteer Fire Department was the ratepayers meeting. The area rate 2024 to 2025 is 0.045 per 100, up from 0.0397 per 100. And I said just a few notes worth mentioning. Kentville Volunteer Fire Department did 500 calls last year. And my understanding is the idea is to keep the revised and approved rate unchanged over the next couple of years. The 28th was regional sewer, where we received a regional sewer capital update on aeration upgrades. We were advised that GFL desludging work was complete and that the overall work scope, the aeration and the related infrastructure works was 95% complete. The formal commissioning of the new aeration equipment and installation was scheduled for April the 1st, and there was a report on the force main breaks from Eves Hollow, RG5 to Eves Hollow, and CBCL is now in discussions on a way forward on fixing that force main. April the 10th was Investment Advisory Committee. As March 31st, we're sitting just north of 13 million. I just made note there that we've worked diligently as a committee to come up with a comprehensive view of what the funds look like for the residents of Kentville. It's actually titled your investment account statement, and it is essentially the account at a glance. It outlines the holdings with changes and balances the year to date and this period. 460,000 was paid in full to the operating budget, March 31st, 2024, and we're fortunate to be able to inject those funds back into the operating so that we can maintain our current and commercial residential tax rates. April the 10th, I attended IMSA on behalf of Mayor Snow, where request for decision award of provision of curbside collection of source separated solid waste contract was awarded. April 15th, I chair REMO. The minutes are attached. They're quite lengthy, but I would encourage you all to review those. April 15th, Kentville Volunteer Fire Department. This was a meeting with CAO Lawrence and Councillors Gerard and Zabian to discuss the service agreement between TOK and the fire department. KBC, April 17th. The minutes are not yet circulated. I will circulate those with next month's report, and I just wanted to make a note that Genevieve has now finished her role there, and they are in the stages, and I believe they put forward an offer to a new ED last week. April the 17th was IMSA. I attended that on behalf of Mayor Snow. There were progress updates, updates from Valley Waste, King's Transit, and the next meeting is May 15th. March 21st was a KBC mingle of business owners from Kentville and surrounding communities. April 11th, Kentville Historical Society, where I attended the AGM and heard the talk from Louis Camo on the Cornwallis Inn, now called the Main Street Station. It was absolutely excellent. I think they had upwards of 80 people there. April the 20th was the 120th anniversary of the Kings County Museum. I attended that. And April the 18th was a client visit. April the 23rd, I celebrated Burger Wars with Laura Churchill Duke and Councillor York. And I just wanted to make a note with regards to FCM. It's regrettable that I'm unable to attend FCM this year, but I look forward to Councillor Huntley and Mayor Snow's report upon their return. And that is my report.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Before we go on, we only have one sign language interpreter this evening, and she has been flying furiously, trying to keep up with all of the words flying out of our lips. And so we'll take a very short break for 5 minutes. Council in place if there are no objections. for that. Our interpreter, as you probably saw her this evening, did an hour and a half all on her own, so quite amazing young woman. And we're so fortunate to have them. All right, Councillor York, your turn for your report.
Thank you. I've attended the same meetings as my colleagues. One of note that I would like to touch on is the ratepayers meeting from the Kentville Volunteer Fire Department. It's held every year, obviously. It's the annual ratepayers meeting, but fewer than 60 people were in attendance, and that number makes up those big financial decisions every year. So those 60 votes make up those, whether there's a rate increase or not. And we have a large service area. So that's something I'm hoping we as a town and as a council can get on people's radars next year. Because that's fewer than 60, that's less than 1% of the town of Kentville rocking up. And that needs to be, that number needs to increase, I think, in my opinion. As Councillor Gerard alluded to, the Board of Police Commissioners met. We had our monthly meeting, and a very timely meeting. We had a presentation from Ginger McVie, who is the Executive Director at Chrysalis House, in light of recent comments made at the provincial level about domestic violence not being a great concern in Nova Scotia. It is absolutely a great concern. It is one of, if not the highest call for service volume in the town of Kentville, and we are not unique in the province of Nova Scotia. So it was a good reminder for us as a board and for us now to recognize that domestic violence is absolutely a crisis in our communities. But the work that Ginger and her team are doing at Chrysalis House is incredible. And the work that has gone into the relationship between Kentville Police Service and Chrysalis House and the clients of Chrysalis House is one that we should be proud of. It's one that has taken a long time and is one that has a lot of work behind it, but it has created an environment where women and children are feeling safer, and where we have a working relationship as Kentville Police Service with that service provider, and that's huge, and it's not something that happens across the province, so that's something to really be proud of. We are also waiting to have our budget meeting for the Board of Police Commission, so we haven't received our operating budget just yet, which means that we will likely have a special budget meeting in the month of May, in addition to our regularly scheduled police commission meeting, so that we can approve that and send it off to council with a stamp of approval or not. A lot of the same meetings that my colleagues have been to, so I won't touch on those again. I did want to mention as well that there are a lot of Safe Grad events happening in the town and surrounding area for our graduating class of Northeast Kings. And also a huge shout out to the staff and students of KCA who just wrapped up Shrek Jr. the musical, which was very well attended. It was wonderfully produced, and staff and students should feel very proud of the work that they've done. So thank you for contributing to our community beyond your work, your scheduled work hours, and probably your scheduled contract hours. So we really do appreciate that. Some local talent from members in the audience as well. So it was the offspring of those members of the audience. But it was a wonderful performance, and everyone should be very proud. So I will leave it at that. I know our interpreter isn't here, but I'm tired of my own voice, so we will move along.
All right, thank you. Councillor Maxwell, you have a question?
Yes, thank you through the chair to Councillor York. Could you please elaborate on the movement of the committee, what progress they're making on the regional recreation facility? I noticed you had it in your report,
Yeah.
but there isn't much there.
No, there isn't, because we haven't yet had clearance to bring things back to the councils. That is happening soon. We are making some decisions. We had a meeting, and the CAO was in attendance as well. It has been a glacially slow process, and is one that I wish would have moved a lot faster. But when we're working with 3 municipal counterparts, we kind of have to go at the average pace and perhaps not at the pace that I would like to go to just to get it done, at the risk of losing potential partners at the table. That said, there should be an update that can come to council relatively soon, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of we had to do some next steps, and then those steps should be solidified shortly. Please.
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, there are some decision points that we recognize that have to be addressed in a timely fashion. So I anticipate in the next 30 plus days there will be something coming back to council that will be more concrete than what we're allowed to say right now.
But I do appreciate the comment, Councillor Maxwell. It's been terribly slow.
Yeah.
And-
Is there a reason why it's so private? Like, why we can't know what some of the sticking points are? You know, is there a reason why it has to be so cloak and dagger, so to speak?
Not cloak and dagger so much as it's negotiations and land and contract deals, correct? Is my understanding, and why I haven't spoken to it here, because we are looking at potential sites, and so we are back and forth with landowners, and that would deal with prices and contracts and things that aren't public information just yet.
I would say that she is correct. Location is a huge first step, and
Right. No, I agree with that, but if we're looking for a location, then we must have a design. So, you know, why can't we even know what the design is, or what's gonna be in it, or anything like that? It just, you know, it's just, there's just nothing. It's just like a vacuum.
So we had that presentation from the developers. They brought forward what it would look like with the pool and court facilities. And they made a proposal and presented that to the councils. We had a joint council meeting
Right.
and all of that information. So we have had that information.
So is that what it is? Did it change at all, or, and I think we weren't supposed to bring it to the public, but I don't understand why the public can't know, you know, kind of what it might look like, at least, something like that?
It's on the
They
Wolfville
have,
site.
pardon?
It was publicized on
Yeah,
the
on the
Wolfville.
town of Wolfville, Wolfville
Yeah.
and Bloom, or
Right.
Business in Bloom
Yeah.
website. So that has all been
Can we
public
put it on
information.
ours? So-
It was through the committee. It was designed to go on that website because they have a system set up to receive feedback and information.
But is there some reason why we can't put a picture or whatever on our site and say this is, you know, kind of like what it's gonna be, and this is kind of what, you know?
If I'm not mistaken, that was linked at some point either through our socials or on our website. And the committee as a whole had designated that website, the town of Wolfville's business, I forget what it's called, Wolfville and Bloom or
Yeah.
something to that effect. So they are the designated houser of that information. And so we had linked to it. And so, yes, but we still have to operate within the confines of the agreement, which had it being housed on the Wolfville and Bloom website. So it has been public. It has been public information for council and for our communities, and it has been shared both here and through our socials.
Okay, I just don't think it's widely, you know, that there's a lot of people that know what's going on, because I keep continually getting questions about it. And so I just think it's been so long
Yeah.
that people are, you know, kind of wondering what's going on. So, anyway, all right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, Councillor Zabian.
Thank you. So I attended all the meetings that the rest of you did. Councillor Maxwell mentioned the Heritage Committee, so just to elaborate a little more on that. We did come up with a draft, and the committee has decided to send this draft to the CAO as well as the town solicitor, so they can kind of make sure everything's in good standing, and then that'll come back to the committee, and then we'll take further action with the intent to bring this back to council relatively soon. The other meetings have all been mentioned. I'm not gonna mention those. The only thing I'm gonna touch on very quickly is that last week I was called by Todd Vino on City News regarding council expenses. And we did a quick interview on the radio for 5-10 minutes, and while I was on the radio, or when I was done, they took calls, and a former mayor of Dartmouth, most of you would know Gloria McCluskey, she called in. And she's, I think, got like 23 years of being mayor, and then after they amalgamated, she was a councillor. She commented and echoed what I said and told me to keep on pushing through. So I just want to make a point that when you look at our expenses for the town of Kentville, compared to a municipality like West Hants, which has more than 3 times our population, we have, 6,500 people, and West Hants has 19,000 roughly. We, as a town, our council mayor expenses, one of our councillors has spent the equivalent of their entire 11 or 12 body council, including their mayor. And I'm not attacking anybody around this room, because we have a budget and we have a policy in place and we own that. So what I'm suggesting, and I will bring this forward, is we should look at policy G4. I think whenever there's a trip, and I'll elaborate on this later time, but when there's a trip, we should know the cost and if there's any value of it to the town of Kentville. So I just think, you know, we've got to tighten things up a little bit, and that's a good place maybe to start at. Again, though, we have this policy already there, so nothing's been done incorrectly. It's just time maybe to look at it and review it. Thank you.
Thank you. CAO, did you have any updates that you wanted to provide to council based on your last update?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll keep it relatively simple, but there is a couple of meetings I'd like to comment on. A lot of time spent on budget and on the deed-transfer tax report. I did take an ICS 200 course for Remo. I took the course probably about 6 or 7 years ago. I've used it twice since then, and I felt if there was an issue in town that I wouldn't be where I should be. One meeting that I'd like to comment on that I found enjoyable, the Director of Public Works and Superintendent, if that's the right title, and Chief and Board Manager for the Fire Services met on an issue with regards to a water break and training that night. I'd just like to comment on how positive and constructive the meeting was, and it was from the start to the end. It was oriented on outcomes and moving forward and learning how we can do things better. It was enjoyable to sit in on. Internally, staff that work on the Apple Blossom Festival met, so we had our parks crew, recreation crew, Lindsay, myself, Director of Public Works, attended a webinar from the province on the Nova Scotia Guard, actually two. One I believe the mayor was on, and the other search and rescue. I didn't attend the third session, which was the fire services, but I figure it would be a repeat of the ground search and rescue discussion points. I met with a number of citizens on various issues, and I attended my first labor management meeting with the union. Other than the day-to-day activities, that was my time period between the last CAC meetings.
All right, thank you very much, CAO. Council, did you have any questions for the CAO? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, through the chair. CEO Lawrence, we're looking sort of towards the mid to late part of May for operating. And how many meetings do you suspect we will be looking at for that particular budget?
Your time frame is probably correct. It's probably more towards the end of May,
Okay.
and I wouldn't say more than I expect there'll be more meetings than there were to approve the capital budget. I would be happy to be wrong, but I expect there may well be.
No, that's great. Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing further, I have a rather short report this evening. So again, with the IMSA, I am on the audit committee for both Valley Waste and King's Transit, and we met with our auditors to review the audit plan. Council meetings, as per everyone else's attendance, Kentville ratepayers meeting, and IMSA board meeting. We had a presentation from the GRTA on the plans for transit in Nova Scotia, and further to that, the board meeting. On the 27th of March, the NSFM executive met to plan for federal advocacy. And on the 10th of April, I attended the Investment Advisory Committee with an update on that portfolio. On the 16th of April, the NSFM executive met again to discuss office space and FOIPOP information coming out of the NSFM. On the 12th of April, with the CAO, attended the presentation by Emergency Management, and that was done to mayors and wardens. It was I'll call it a pre-meeting meeting by the province to give us details on the plan Nova Scotia Guard and stand-up of the Emergency Management Department. Up until this point, Emergency Management has been under Municipal Affairs, and now it will become its own department based on everything that happened last summer and kind of ongoingly and some of the recommendations that have come out of reports. So fun events that I got to attend on the 22nd of March. I was fortunate enough to be invited to KCA for Holly Carr's presentation with regards to youth mental health and Out of the Darkness, and it was absolutely wonderful dance and this light show, and anyway, it was really a nice presentation at KCA, and if you get the opportunity to see Holly Carr's presentation, please take advantage of it. On the 27th of March, I attended a luncheon in New Minas at the Canna Connect, and it's a group that delivers compassionate, professional, and effective care to veterans, RCMP, and their family. And on the 2nd of April, I met with Michael Westcott to hear about plans of a potential housing development here in Kentville. And I was out of office from the 3rd to the 24th of April. And that is my report. All right, moving on to our new business. The only item that we have under new business is with regards to the Kentville Inclusion and Access Advisory Committee membership appointment. CAO, did you wish to speak to this, or are we ready to take the recommendation?
So I'm fine with just a recommendation. If council has any questions on it, myself or the deputy clerk would be happy to answer them.
All right, thank you. So we do have a recommendation from the Inclusion and Access Advisory Committee to recommend the appointment of a citizen member. So the motion is that council approve the appointment of citizen Sahid Akende, I screwed it up again, to the Kentville Inclusion and Access Advisory Committee as a voting member for a term of 2 years. If someone could move that, please. Councillor Huntley, thank you. Councillor Zabian, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve the appointment of citizen Sahid Akende to the Kentville Inclusion and Access Advisory Committee as a voting member for a term of 2 years. Is there any discussion on this matter or questions to the CAO? Or deputies? With no questions or no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on approval of the appointment of citizen Sahid Akende to the Kentville Inclusion and Access Advisory Committee as a voting member for a term of 2 years. Voting is now open. Voting is now closed, and that motion is carried. Thank you very much. We have no other correspondence other than the stuff that we had on the deed transfer tax, so we move on from that. And we do have the floor open to our citizens for public comment, and citizens are invited to make comment to council on matters currently before the council. And please state your name and your address as Kentville, please, and your comments are limited to 3 minutes.
My name is Ron Cousins. To me, like having that tax when you sell your land or whatever it is, or your house, you're just trading one tax for another tax. The tax has got to go up. We know that. The people want things, and if they want them, and I see it here all the time, they want the councillor to give them. They want.
It's gonna take a minute to get it up to your level. How high does that go, Jonathan?
That's good, thanks.
All right, there we go.
If they want the people, and I should be telling them and not you, if they want to have a new rink and they want a new swimming pool and they want all the recreation things that they want, which I don't care about, but they do care about, the money isn't gonna fall out of the sky. There's only one way they're gonna get it, and that's to put up the taxes. So making another tax so you don't have to put up a regular tax, you're just trading one tax for another tax. Personally, I would sooner you put up my taxes, and I'll pay for all the things that I don't want, but I'll pay for some of them, or help pay for them. And I know, I've seen it here, like Councillor Maxwell said, and people come to her all the time, and I want this, and I want that, and I want this. And she's right. We can't let the town get behind, because we may as well pay it now and get it over with. It's the town infrastructure and the stuff that we need, and Councillor Maxwell's right. We've got to get the money now, and rather than boarding up the town like she said. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll get a step ladder. Dennis Skio, 29 Alicia Boulevard. I'm opposed to a transfer tax. I'm opposed to any new taxes. I think you have to look at internal spending, and one of the suggestions we had a sidebar, and I think I confirmed that we're still using 10-year debentures. And if you put an asset in the ground, it's gonna last 50 years. Why do you want to pay it off in 10? That's like taking a mortgage out on a house that you bought for $1 million and saying, no, I'm not gonna take it out for 30 years, I'm gonna take it out for 10 years. So look at all the things you have to give up by paying off that debt that fast. So I think you need to look at your revenue streams, and no question, I support what Councillor Maxwell is saying. We need to renew our infrastructure. We need to, renew our facilities, but look at your expenditures and see how you can do a better job of that. And I would suggest 10-year debentures. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you all very much. We have no in-camera this evening, and we have completed our agenda. So I would call for an adjournment as there is no further business. And the time is 8:03. Thank you very much.